Well, it's a great day. I'm Dean Jones, and I'm the president and CEO of Realogics, Sotheby's International Realty, and this is Market Perspectives. I am so glad to have Dehlan Gwo, our vice president of new developments for the Realogics Nation. Good to see you. Thanks for
Dean.
being here. So I got to ask you a couple questions, and then I'm going to drill into the market a little bit. But I understand you're an avid fisherman.
I am.
And what are your favorite spots around town?
If I told you, I have to kill you.
Oh, no. It's that secretive.
No, I mean, it really just depends on the season. You know, this time of the year, go out to the Peninsula Olympic National Park for steelhead. Those are these big ocean-going rainbow trout. They kind of look like salmon. Kind of the prized fish of the Pacific Northwest.
Wow.
Through the summer, we fish for salmon out here in Puget Sound, right in front of the Seattle skyline.
Oh, beautiful.
Trolling back and forth. It's quite amazing. So.
And you go up into the mountains too, and
we do a lot of that.
Fishing?
Yep, fly fishing for trout up in Cle Elum, Ellensburg, east of the mountains. That's an interesting place. It's really the closest place you can get to the Rockies, but it's 60 to 90 minutes away.
You know, Dehlan, you've had an interesting perspective when it comes to housing cycles and in new development specifically. You're sort of like the president, the client, the luminary. I mean, you've been on all sides of it, right?
I sure have. I have been on the development side, the ownership side. Yep. Started really my career 10 years ago with you on the sales side, been on the sales floor. Ended up buying a condo at the project that we were selling at Nexus. So went through that whole process as a buyer, as a consumer as well. It's been an interesting decade, definitely. And condo talk. I feel like we've had it so many times. Call it the lost tapes, but here we are on recording.
Well, what are the themes of the condo talks that you've been having?
I think it really comes down to, as with all real estate, supply and demand.
Okay.
When we were sharing with our brokers recently, where I was saying, I actually find it very difficult to predict buyer demand.
Okay.
That's something that, is actually, it's out of my wheelhouse. I won't do it, frankly. You had Carice here. You've had Matthew Gardner here. These are people that are better suited for that conversation.
On the demand side.
On the buyer demand side.
Okay.
What I can tell you is supply.
Okay.
Condo supply, condo inventory, deliveries, the pipeline. We can track that down. It's an exact science. Tracking these, large condo projects from entitlements to groundbreaking to delivery.
It's fairly predictable.
It is.
And I understand that you and your team have done great work, and I don't mind sharing with the audience. I mean, you have reverse engineered all of the buildings to know exactly what inventory they have and what they're likely priced at. So in a way, you can scatter graph and figure out how to price inventory. But pricing has been a really fickle thing over the last couple of years. And you were working on several different towers, and you're representing all of our buildings right now. What would you say has been the peak to trough correction in values for the condominium developments of this current cycle, say from 2018 through 2024?
Sure. 2018, 2019, this is when many of these towers that we see today were pre-selling.
Okay.
And aspirationally, these towers or the developers were trying to hit $1,200, $1,300, $1,400 per foot.
Okay.
We've come down anywhere from about 20, 25% to 30%.
Yeah.
Peak to trough where we are today.
And I'm sure that's not great news for the developers,
Sure.
but the silver lining for buyers is, would you rather
an amazing opportunity
pay
once in a lifetime.
$1,400 a foot, or would you rather pay $1,000 a square foot? And we've seen this before. We saw it after the Great Recession and the credit crunch, and construction stopped. The last delivery was a Scala in downtown Seattle, which occupied in late 2010. And that groundbreaking took place in the summer of 2007. And then, of course, the world changed. I mean, the construction credit wasn't available. Pre-sales became anemic, and developers were no longer very confident because the buyers weren't very confident. Nobody wants to catch the falling knife. But after the knife is done falling, and that's where it feels like we are right now. So you're representing the Greystone condominiums, as well as the Infinity Shore Club condominiums, and also the team is representing the First Light condominiums. Those 3 buildings are distinct because they represent the last deliveries of 2022, 2023, and 2024. And how many condominiums are planned thereafter?
Zero. With these developments, these condo developments, they take about $1,400 per foot to pencil out right now.
Okay.
And 3 to 4 years minimum from groundbreaking to completion.
Right.
So very confidently, we can tell you that after Greystone, after First Light, there will be nothing between now, 2024, plus 4 years to 2028. No new condo deliveries.
And we've seen that before because the period of time from Escala's delivery in 2010, which was timed at the bottom of the market and proved to be a great buy for those that jumped in, we didn't see another condo tower until Boza Development with the Insignia
South Tower,
and that delivered in the fall of 2015. So what is that, 5 years? 5 years and change. So it wouldn't be surprising if we went 5 years without any new supply.
Nope, 5 years without any new supply in way higher prices.
That's right, because they will not get a construction loan and they will not be able to digest the pro forma without having values be $1,400, $1,500, maybe $1,600 by then per foot. And where would you say the benchmark is right now, the sweet spot where sales are happening?
Oh, around downtown between the towers that are still selling, I would say about $1,000 per foot or just under.
Really? So the delta between the pricing that's being achieved in the market, and by the way, this is move-in ready, brand new, gorgeous condominiums, the same product that would be delivered in 5 years if they were to do it again. But we're 30-40% appreciation before we see new towers pencil. And then anecdotally, I had to ask because I looked, and I'm wondering if you have a perspective on the resale side of things, because there was a pretty big sell-off of condominium resales in 2020 when the COVID pandemic was at its peak. Downtown Seattle lost 5,000 residents. And some of them probably went up to a salmon stream to go fishing with you. And so we are competing with resales as well. But I did notice that pending sales are up 30% year to date.
They are.
And the supply of resales are actually down as well. And I was trying to unpack why that might have been. So at the very time we had a crop of these new towers, we also had historically high resales. And that's because a lot of those apartment towers were competing with those investor units for condominium ownership. And, those folks saw median prices dropping and they probably wanted to unload or at least test the market, because now they went a couple months without a tenant and prices are dropping and they could harvest some equity. And so they're going to test the market, and some were successful and others just had to wait it out. But it's important to remember that, if you're going to buy in the market today for new construction, that you're also competing against the resale. And really both have to recalibrate and kind of touch bottom and build their way back up in value before we see developers play their role.
Correct. And another dynamic, since you touched on it, that we continue to watch is the dynamic between rental apartments and for sale condos, right? Going back to what you mentioned about downtown Seattle losing 5,000 residents during COVID, just as quickly can downtown Seattle gain another 5,000 residents.
Well, they did in 2021. They came back.
So my point being, when you look at the current condo inventory, new construction, resale, inventory will never grow as quickly as demand can grow.
Right.
And if you look at, all of these towers that have completed since 2020, we were saying, so just about 2,000 condo units have been delivered or will be delivered through the end of this year, from 2020 to 2024, 2,000 units. Just about 70% of those 2,000 units have been sold. That leaves 600 units to be absorbed between now and the soonest the next condo delivery can be made, which is 4 years from now.
Yeah.
So downtown Seattle is stuck with 600 new condos for, to be absorbed in 4 years.
Well, and that doesn't sound like an awful lot of units. And to put it in perspective, if only a fraction, less than 5% of the condominiums that have, the apartment dwellers that have occupied in the last decade decided to become a buyer instead of a renter, on a unit basis, you'd be out of inventory.
Yeah, we're seeing it now, especially over at our Greystone Tower, right on First Hill. Beautiful new condominium tower, beautiful new condominium units, kind of an Art Deco look, something that you've never really seen delivered in Seattle before. It's a beautiful building. We have so many young buyers that were apartment dwellers that are seeing our values now at about $900, $950 per foot, and saying this is truly a once in a cycle opportunity.
That's right.
For me to get into the market.
Right.
They've been watching, a lot of these young tech workers that live downtown in these apartment towers, they've been in the condo market watching, waiting, and learning for the last 3, 4, 5, 6 years.
Right.
And they watched as these condo prices went from, $1,300 per foot to $1,000 per foot to now $900 per foot. And I think they're smart. They're smart folks. Tech workers. I think that they intuitively know now is the time to strike.
Did any one of the most recent condominium developments escape this correction, Dehlan? Let's go back up the train. Nexus, Spire, the Emerald, Coda, of course, Greystone and First Light. There's a half dozen very high-profile condominiums. And did any of them not have a price correction?
Unscathed? No.
Right.
Yeah.
So it is sort of an omnipresent situation. It seems like the trend was once they came near TCO, which is the temporary certificate of occupancy, they had homes to show. So sales picked up dramatically. What wasn't really working well was pre-sales, right?
Right.
Because, who's buying a couple of years before they need the home unless they really had FOMO and was worried that we were going to run out of inventory. But that wasn't the case.
Yeah.
But now that these buildings are show ready, seems like sales, like Greystone was the most recent one to deliver, and it seems like you've had a pretty good year so far.
Oh, yeah. We expect to close 10 homes in March.
Nice.
So kudos to our Greystone team. They are killing it over there.
Yeah, that's great. Well, and it helps to be able to see the product.
Yeah.
And, Greystone has another distinction because most of these buildings were absorbing bottom up. So affordability is an issue. So give us a sense of where the price points are and where you're seeing the activity.
Yeah. Greystone, we have homes priced from the high 300,000s, studios on the 3rd and 4th floor, up to about $2+ million for the penthouses.
Okay.
So it really hits all price points, all product types that people are looking for in the city.
And given that all these other buildings had a couple of year head run on Greystone, I'm imagining that they've sold through most of their lower priced inventory.
That's right. So Greystone actually, we did a study of what units in which buildings are still available and what price points they hit. Greystone actually holds about 80% of all downtown inventory priced under $800,000.
So what you see is what you get for inventory.
Correct.
And that's where the more affordable price points are. It's very difficult. Let's talk about the developer's role.
Sure.
And I know you're in continuing education with University of Washington. Very proud of that.
Go Dogs.
Go Dogs. What a great year.
Sure has been.
And you're studying with many other luminaries in, tell us a little bit about the program and what you're learning.
Yeah. So I am a proud University of Washington undergrad, and graduated, about 9 years ago. Came back to school recently to get a Master of Science in Real Estate, the MSRE program. I can't say enough good things about the program.
Right.
From the faculty to my own classmates that are doing some amazing things out there in the market, to our advisory board. It's almost like a large real estate fraternity.
Yeah.
Everybody in Seattle in real estate is somehow linked to this program. So it's been an amazing experience.
Impressive wealth of knowledge being shared and bestowed to the next generation of developer. Where do you think you're going to take this experience to continue to add value in the sales and marketing side of things, or to eventually develop?
Absolutely. It's all about being able to speak the language that our clients speak, our developer clients, right?
I mean, you can commiserate with the developers right now. It's been a tough run for the last couple of years. I mean,
Right.
what were some of the headwinds that developers were facing, as our audience understands and digests why they're not developing? Why do they have PTSD?
Boy, it's been like a 12-round fight these
Yeah.
last 4 or 5 years, especially delivering in downtown Seattle. So previously to when we linked up again last year, I was with a development company called Create World.
Right.
We were the developers behind the Emerald in downtown Seattle, right above Pike Place Market, second and Stewart, 262 units.
Beautiful building.
Right. And currently delivering Mari, which is a beautiful new building over in downtown Bellevue. Now, with the Emerald, I'll tell you the experience on the Emerald, going through all those trials and tribulations of not just the market, but really everything COVID threw at us. The Emerald delivered in fall of 2020. Yeah. So we were already about, 4 or 5 months into COVID. And I remember as we were completing the building too, this was spring of 2020, when the downtown civil unrest started as well. I think there were 2 different nights where, I was sitting with our GC, closing up shop 5 p.m. and we heard through the news the next day there was going to be a protest over on 4th Avenue. So we ended up calling every shop in town, asking if they had any wood boards, and calling every contractor that we knew that was able to come in tonight to be able to install them. Meanwhile, we were trying the best we could to finish up a new glassy building. So we went through that. We went through COVID, and of course the interest rate hikes. It's been, left hook, right hooks at the condo market since.
And there's political dysfunction too. I mean, now we can talk about it because we have largely a new city administration. Sure. And some of the tax policies that were tried, which caused HQ2 and, Amazon, are they leaving? And obviously we know the answer is they're not. But, the willingness for a buyer to invest as a stakeholder in a city, which are like condominiums, are like safety deposit boxes, right? And that's important if you're going to make that investment. You don't want to buy if you feel like prices are going to correct. So it's important for the developer to go ahead and take that, off the table by making the corrections themselves. But also you want to buy into, the goodwill of where the city's going next.
100%.
So give me your perspective, because you lived downtown for a number of years. And of course you heard it firsthand, and really important where you feel like this city is going next.
Yeah, sure. And I'll tell you what, I think the black swan that nobody's talking about in the market the last few years, you can talk about COVID, civil unrest, etc. The black swan that nobody was talking about was the safety of downtowns in America. And I think that's one of the reasons why America has been so slow, particularly on the West Coast, to come back into the office.
Right. Well, it's the intervention and it's the enforcement issues. And I'm so proud of the Downtown Seattle Association and our mayor, Harrell, and, the police department. I mean, we went through some dark days there where we literally lost a precinct, let's face it, and we can't become Freatle, and without getting too political about it, but I will say that stakeholders are at the ready. They want to invest. I don't think that those commercial office buildings are going to roll up and go anywhere, Dylan. I think there might be more problems for the Class C and Class D buildings on the peripheral. But basically, as those lease rates come down, those elevators will go up and there will be population. I'd much rather have the inventory than not, because, we know we're not breaking ground on any new office buildings anytime soon. But the buildings will fill up, and it might be a little bit of time, but that's our runway, Dylan, and there will be a need for, walk to work again for those residents. But that's not the only reason people live downtown. I mean, the very livable city, and lifestyle attractions and all the sporting events and cultural venues. And, I literally grew up here professionally. So it's really hard to look at what was happening on our streets and seeing our favorite restaurants boarded up. And
Look, I lived downtown for 5 years, and those were a fun 5 years. Even through COVID and the civil unrest, it was, it was special to be in the heart of a city, in the heart of such a beautiful city like Seattle, to be able to look out my window and see the mountains, see the city, see the sound. There's nowhere else like it.
I wouldn't bet against it, that's for sure. And a lot of our audience may not realize that we have over 100 Bay Area headquartered companies that have major satellite offices up here, and some of those satellite offices are larger than the headquarters.
Right.
And the reason is recruiting and retention. They're coming here for some R&R.
And zero income taxes.
Well, that plays a role, and with the repeal of the the capital gains tax, that could also help, stick, especially in the tech field, where so much of that wealth in those millennial workers are based in their restricted stock units, and they're like literally teeming in these apartment buildings. So the numbers are pretty staggering. I mean, in the last decade, more than 30,000 multifamily housing units were developed in the city of Seattle, downtown, within walking distance of each other. But like 94% of that was built for rent.
Right.
And that rent is not inexpensive.
Right.
So I would have to imagine that some of the play for these condominiums that are available would be just investors. I mean, why not buy a bank of them and rent them out?
Definitely. Yep. We're seeing that. We are seeing the return of the investor as well back to some of our projects currently.
Let's jump over Elliott Bay
Sure.
into West Seattle and talk about Infinity Shore Club residences for a bit. You've had some good success there of recent, and I noted that 4 of the last 5 residents that you put into contract there all accepted an early occupancy agreement. What is that exactly, and what's the benefit to a would-be buyer that might otherwise not step forward?
Sure. I think we observed through the last couple of years, especially as interest rates rose and the resale market kind of froze, the appetite for a product like Infinity Shore Club is high. People love it. They walk in, they love it, they fall in love, they look at their spouse, honey, I can see ourselves here. This is the exact product that we've been looking for. But they go home, they realize, hey, honey, we've got to sell our house.
Right.
And we've got to move. And we've got to pack up 20, 30 years of memories and actually make this jump.
Yeah.
And then they look at their interest rates that they're sitting on, or in many cases, they own their home outright. And they start running the calculations, and once they start crunching the numbers, it makes less sense, especially given how big of a move, how big of a lifestyle change a move is. What we've done here at Infinity Shore Club is we've allowed them to move in early so that they and their real estate agent can properly move.
Okay.
And then their real estate agent can properly stage the home, and do whatever they need to do, paint, remodel, and then finally list the home.
So literally declutter the home, including the humans.
Correct.
And get it ready for the market. And I know we've also been able to accept some contingent home sales as well. So for the audience to remember that this is a brief window of opportunity in this market where a would-be buyer of a new property has to be a seller to become a buyer, and they're unwilling to risk selling their home where they buy something else and then don't know if they're going to be successful in selling their home. So really, you've made an accommodation, not just physically, but it's also logistically, emotionally, and financially, allowing that would-be resident at Infinity Shore Club Residence to move in effectively as a renter with a purchase option on that home, and then sell their existing home that might need 3 or 4 months of market time or repair. And I think we could all agree, if you've been in that home for 30 years or more, it's probably not show ready. And so this is a wonderful accommodation, which is here for now, but maybe not for long, because as inventory is absorbed in that building, the developer is less likely to take that kind of a contingent home purchase, right?
Right.
So it's something that's available right now as the market's in this inflection point, and I think it's a very creative process and very gracious and is successful.
Yep, it's definitely a market need, and for a limited time, it's an opportunity that buyers can take advantage of we might not ever see any other program like this, for a while. So,
Well, and if you want a building like that, let's give credit to the developer, even though it was tough sledding for the last 5 years. It took them 25 years to assemble the land to build that building.
5 single-family home lots.
Hard to do on Alki Beach, that's for sure.
Yeah.
So really, you're saying the condominium product lines are becoming a little more rare. There hasn't been any groundbreaking, so it could be a number of years before we see any new inventory. Where else do you see development opportunities in the Seattle Bellevue metro area, or even in the ex-urban markets?
Sure. Obviously the East Side, I think the East Side has been relatively insulated from, the problems that downtown Seattle has seen. We've seen all these companies move over. The school districts, the quality of life there is excellent. But let's keep going east, over the mountains.
Okay.
Over to Trailside Homes, their Adair
Cle Elum.
project. Yeah.
That's exciting. I mean, that's unique in the sense as well, given, it's 950 plus single family homes that are entitled and ready to go vertical and hitting on some product types and price points that weren't available before. And I think going west also is another opportunity. I'm excited to look at opportunities in Kitsap County because we're seeing folks jump on these fast ferries. And so it's not just driving to affordability, but maybe floating there.
What an amazing commute.
It's not too bad. It's not too bad. And even the foot ferry to West Seattle is another alternative. But I do think, Dylan, with stay home or hybrid work weeks, this post-pandemic reality about how we do business now in the future, especially for some professions, may not require going into the office as much. I mean, I know even as an owner of a real estate brokerage, I've got these beautiful retail locations, but it's becoming more and more difficult to get our agents to come into the office. We've just figured it out that we can live and work differently. And I wonder if that's going to open up new development opportunities in ex-urban locations that might be a little bit more resort focused.
Yeah, I think we already saw it during COVID, the work from home shift. I think that's only going to grow, if not accelerate, as people value their lifestyles, with the ability to do work through the internet. So.
Well, and there's other urbanity, nuggets out there too, where these are smaller suburban towns that have their true Main Street and create a lifestyle.
Small town USA.
And it's authentic and it's enduring. And there really is less need to go to the big city, especially now when half your shopping is coming to your front door. So you think about some other markets. I mean, we saw that in Woodinville, didn't we? Or in Bothell, or, you're also seeing the rebirth of some older established cities like Everett and Tacoma.
Sure.
They have the zoning, they have the light rail, they have the infrastructure, and they were just becoming more favored now because of affordability. So I think that is also an area where we're going to see a lot of development. And I will also say, as it relates to MHA, and some of the taxation policies that these developers are faced with, I mean, it no longer pencils to do certain projects like townhomes. I understand the permits for City of Seattle townhomes are down like 60-70%. They just don't pencil.
Wow.
Some of the developers that we were working with in yesteryear up and left, and they went to other markets like Arizona, where they're seeing rapid growth and housing policies that just make they pencil, Dylan. They make more sense. So unless the cities are going to reverse these trends, and I don't want to take away the need for affordable housing funds, that MHA and other policies like that are creating, but the reality is if we overtax, and the developers can't pencil the projects, then it doesn't matter how much goodwill is behind the idea. It has to make sense. I mean, you must be learning about the capital stack, in the University of Washington right now. I mean, how many no-profit developers do you know out there?
Oh boy, this is not a non-profit business.
It is not. And, what are some other headwinds that developers are facing beyond, taxation? I mean, what about supply chain and hard costs? I mean, are you seeing any relief in that?
There's actually been a bit of relief over the last 6 months, materials cost.
Okay.
But, to see where it was before COVID to now, it's still pretty staggering.
Yeah. And then redevelopment areas. We had great success with the Jade condominiums in Totem Lake, which basically took what was largely criticized as one of the most underperforming, regional shopping centers and turn it into, the Northwest version of Rodeo Drive. It's beautiful.
It is.
And they packed in several thousand units of market rate apartments. And then our Jade condominium was the only for sale asset in there. But Whole Foods, great renovation of the movie theater. All the lifestyle attributes that you could want. And I look at that, and then I look at other, like Northgate. Yeah. Northgate's getting a light rail. It's already active. You've got redevelopment.
You've got the crack in there.
Yes. Oh, yes.
Right?
Big news. So I see some potential in other regional shopping malls.
Definitely. It's interesting how you bring up places like Northgate and Totem Lake. I was actually born here, and I grew up here. I had gone to Totem Lake growing up. I could probably count it on one hand. I've been back to Totem Lake since they opened probably 2 dozen times.
Yeah, it's more to do.
There's more to do. It is sleek. It is sexy. You can feel the energy in there.
It's a there.
Yes.
And
it's a destination.
I think the same is true for a lot of the regional shopping centers because they have the land.
Mm-hmm.
They have access to major arterials, if not even a light rail line, either coming soon or in place already. And there just needs to be the political will to do what's known as a spot rezone or a development agreement. Do you want to speak to that, what that is for our audience, and what kind of potential we might have with the right sort of political leanings?
Sure. I think the best case study is where we're sitting right here in the U District.
Okay.
You go outside, and the light rail only came in, 7-8 years ago?
Right.
To the University of Washington. You look up, you look around now, and you see these gleaming apartment towers and student housing towers.
Yeah.
And it's almost unrecognizable from when I first went to school here.
So the light rail was a catalyst, and then an upzone by the political leadership to say, let's go there and sprinkle some fertilizer on that region and get some more vertical development. And it's so true because if we're going to meet the demands of the Puget Sound Regional Council and the Vision 2050, we literally need more than 1 million new homes developed somehow in the region. King County is the target for a lot of that, and I don't think House Bill 1110 is going to get us there on its own. The cities have the potential to trade the one commodity that's at their fingertips, and that's density and verticality.
That's right.
And it's the reason why Manhattan looks the way it does. And I know there's some challenge to do that, but a lot of Vancouver, BC has upzoned neighborhoods, and for that very reason. And you're right. The University District's a great example of what is possible to go vertical and get more multifamily development. But a lot of this is for rent too, right?
Correct.
So I don't think there has been any condominium developments as part of this.
Not up here, no.
Which is our other challenge. And final question, let's talk about the Condominium Act and lender underwriting as it relates to conforming loans with condominiums. What are some of the challenges that developers are facing with the Condominium Act and might make them more of an apartment builder than a condo builder?
It all comes down to risk and return.
Okay.
These are the levers that developers continue to look at concerning condos or going apartments, right?
Okay.
So the Condominium Act, in my opinion, adds a layer of risk to these condominium performers that really make that middle product, that entry-level condominium product, impossible to build. So people ask, where are the entry-level condos? Everything that's been built can be categorized as concrete and steel luxury condo buildings.
Right.
And I think that's half your answer right there.
Well, the Condominium Act, for those that haven't noticed, is a consumer protection provision that basically states a presale buyer will only have 5% earnest money in escrow at risk. And should you choose not to buy the home, regardless of whether the developer performed, you can walk away.
Right.
And certainly if the developer didn't perform, you could walk away and receive your 5% back. But really, if you walk in the home and decide you don't like it for any reason, you can walk away, and all you have at risk is a release of earnest money of 5%. And in some cases, developers will charge more and have argued to be able to keep more. But the bigger challenge is that's not a lot of risk for the buyer when the developer has to come up with 100%
Correct.
of the capital stack, because they're unable to take even the non-refundable deposits out of escrow towards their capital stack.
Right. And this is, I mean, compare. In the state of Washington, you cannot take the buyer's earnest money, the buyer's deposit,
Correct.
and add it to your capital stack as a developer.
Yeah.
Versus other markets, say like South Florida, Miami, correct me if I'm wrong, Vancouver, BC.
Oh, you can take 20, 30% deposits and spend it on the deal.
Right.
Right out of the bank and into the tower.
And that immediately makes condo development so much more feasible in these other markets compared to Seattle and Washington State.
Well, and also, if you don't perform as the buyer in those other markets, you can be sued for specific performance. So the developer just has more confidence that the buyer is going to close. And unfortunately, in the state of Washington, with the Condominium Act, the way it's designed, the developers simply are always at risk that, you might have a building 80% pre-sold with 5% deposits, but if the market goes down 7% or 10%, what's going to happen, Dylan, is you're setting up either for retrades or buyers to walk away. And so the developers starting again, and that is, it's good news for the buyer. It's challenging for the developer. And that's one of the reasons why we've seen 94% of the multifamily housing go for rent and not for sale. And so, we had Carice Busby from Movement Mortgage on recently on the show, and she was talking about, she sees this as a literally generational opportunity to get into home ownership using condominiums, which are very important because townhomes are higher price points, single family homes are much higher price points. And, we can always afford to live in less space, but we can't afford to pay more than we can afford. So I'm a little concerned about this dearth of condominium supply you speak of. I think the demand could rise at the very time that the supply is not there, which is only going to make the condominium values higher until such time as they do pencil for developers or they change legislation. But this is the condominium conundrum that we find ourselves here, and it's particularly visible in Seattle, isn't it? Well, Dylan, thank you so much for coming on the show. I'm Dean Jones, and this is Market Perspectives. We'll see you next time. Be sure to follow us on social media, and do leave a comment. We'll look forward to hearing from you.